I'm 1 week out from the lockdown marathon with everyone. I'm getting a cheeky shuffling 7 to 10 Ks in, and I'm listening to Yuval Noah Harari and Bregman discussing the nature of humanity. Who are we? They both agree that in small scale communities we are friendly, and that is what has helped us take over the world. What they don't agree on is what happens at large scale. Can we do democracy? Can we be our best selves? In my view, this creatrix amorum, this love creative, this higher self. How do we live most of our days out of that place? But what I'm drawn to is a distinction that Bregman brings, which is the difference between optimism and hope. And for me, an optimism is somebody who looks at the way things are, doesn't really see reality for what it is, but through their bias perceives it in an inflated way. A hopeful person is somebody that looks at the way things are and knows that they don't have to be that way. That through an imaginative, hopeful engagement with the world, through creative love, transform the nature of reality rather than create illusion for ourselves that inflates our view of reality. So I see myself as a hopeful realist who wants to see the world exactly as it is, continuing to dissolve the illusions that I've built, but also recognizes that the way things are today includes me and includes you. And through our creative love, through every breath and step that we take, we are transforming that reality which we find ourselves in. And so that leaves room for the stories we tell each other and tell ourselves to have an impact on the next moment of reality, the very next moment, the 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 next moment. And that is how history is created over time. What a conversation. You guys should listen to it if you get a chance. Two of the best thinkers, and what's beautiful about it is how much they agree on about our nature. Wow, you gotta see this. Oh my gosh, this is what it's all about, people. Spring is here. The rebirth is happening. Get outside and breathe the air. See you soon. I've literally just got back in a couple of minutes ago and I feel super inspired, so I want to capture this before I lose it. That Bregman, Yuval Noah Harari conversation is right on the money. There was a few things I wrote down on my phone. They're quite distinct, but they're all interlinked. So the thought I was left with halfway through their conversation was that there is a conception of humanity missing, not homo puppy. That sort of idea of friendliness and niceness doesn't go far enough, but the sense of love expressed in creativity, that when we find that sense of connection beyond ourselves, it leads us to authentic creativity. And these are the stories and the myths that we need to be encouraging, these fictions that we need to be permeating, this creative imagination that reaches into the future and manifests ourselves in the world, which changes the fabric of society and humanity and history at large. I know I've just said a lot of words, but that's because I'm excited. You know, Harari and Bregman are historians. They're not meant to be acting from this place of helping to manifest the future. They're meant to be explaining things as they were. I, however, do not have that remit. My job is to try and help us to create a life worth living. And so in that way, I am being and acting from that place, that belief, that fiction, if you like, manifesting that fiction in reality until the historians and the scientists can see it as a matter of fact. And that's my invitation to you, is to find your sense of self in this idea that we are creative and loving at our best. So what conditions can we create for ourselves in our daily routines and in our policies in society that help us live from that place more frequently, to create more moments manifest with creative love? I agree with them that the idea of nation states as our predominant power mechanism doesn't necessarily play to our strengths. And so it might be possible that we have to think about smaller circles and concentric circles of connectivity. And I'm finding this in my real life. I have, a group of maybe 50 to 100 friends that live between London and Brighton that we've kind of grown up together and spread out a bit with our families. But we get together once a year for family holidays and to reconnect and to feel that sense of tribe. That's one concentric circle for me. And, if we were to develop that further, I'd love to make decisions together and protect each other and share resources. But I'm also part of a global village, probably about 20 of us at the moment, but there probably would be 100 if we were more organized. So maybe we could find ourselves in a politics and governance structure of concentric circles. Instead of paying 20% tax to one national government body, maybe we were paying 21% into different circles that we're a part of, that all look at different stratospheres of society, but yet each group is making small choices that are interconnected and allowing us to be more friendship orientated and coming out of that place of creative love. Now, this is interesting. Harari gets onto, and I'm going to have to listen to it back again.
If you look at what's happened on the vaccine and so forth, it's been a tremendous year, as you say, for science and for belief in experts and belief in scientific progress. On the other hand, it's been a year where there's been an extraordinary practical consequence of the development of conspiracy theories and fake news and all of that. When you see those two together, Yuval, which of those will be the more permanent phenomenon, do you think?
It goes together. I mean, people have this mistaken assumption that truth and fiction cannot coexist, that you cannot believe the experts and at the same time believe in all kinds of ridiculous conspiracy theories. But again, I mean, history indicates that this is not the case. I mean, humans have the ability to believe in the most nonsensical stuff in some areas and to turn to science and experts when they need to do something practical. I mean, to take an extreme example, if you think about Adolf Eichmann developing or preparing the timetables for the trains taking people from the Netherlands or from Hungary to Auschwitz, and designing the gas chambers and how it all works, these are extremely rational people. They rely on the latest technology, on the latest science, on experts. They don't want any fluffy fake news. And at the same time, when it comes to their motivation, why do they do all that? It's because they believe a completely nonsensical, pseudo-scientific theory, which is at its heart is a conspiracy theory about the Jews controlling the world. Now, it's the same person with the same brain, with the same mind. But again, when listening to a speech by Hitler, it's as if they shut down the prefrontal cortex and their critical powers of evaluation and the rational thinking. And then once they get their mission, okay, you plan the timetable for the trains, puff, the prefrontal cortex goes back to action.
Puff, the magic dragon. But it's a really good point. But this on and off is really at the heart of it. When we get practical, we use our rationality, but yet it's the story, the fiction that we're bought into that is what is powering the why, if you like, in Simon Sinek's Leaders Start with Why.
By why, I mean what's your purpose? What's your cause? What's your belief? Why does your organization exist? The inspired leaders and the inspired organizations, regardless of their size, regardless of their industry, all think, act, and communicate from the inside out. The human brain is actually broken into three major components that correlate perfectly with the golden circle. Our newest brain, our Homo sapien brain, our neocortex, corresponds with the what level. The neocortex is responsible for all of our rational and analytical thought and language. The middle two sections make up our limbic brains, and our limbic brains are responsible for all of our feelings, like trust and loyalty. It's also responsible for all human behavior, all decision-making, and it has no capacity for language. In other words, when we communicate from the outside in, yes, people can understand vast amounts of complicated information like features and benefits and facts and figures. It just doesn't drive behavior. When we communicate from the inside out, we're talking directly to the part of the brain that controls behavior, and then we allow people to rationalize it with the tangible things we say and do.
Many of the people that we've seen on this series about beautiful irrationality are trying to say, please, come on, guys, let's get more rational. I'm the opposite. I'm saying let's accept that there is something deep within us, that our sense of humanity does not rely solely in our prefrontal cortex. And I think Yuval goes on to say the same thing, that we need both.
To accomplish big things, whether for good or bad, in history, you need both. You need both truth and fiction.
I don't buy the premise at all that Yuval's using here. Truths for me, they are words of which describe the nature of reality accurately and completely. I'm not sure we have any of those. I think in the midst of the abyss of the unknown, we reach for little glimmers of description that help us to communicate. I certainly don't agree that it's a label that can be given to our scientific endeavors or that which lives in the realm of logic. And on the basis that he's just talking about fragments of accurate descriptors of small parts of that said reality, then we'll just carry on.
Let's say you want to build an atom bomb. Now, to build an atom bomb, you need the truth of physics. If your theory of physics is wrong, you will not be able to build an atom bomb. At the same time, nobody is going to come together to help build the bomb just because you tell them E equals mc squared. That motivates nobody. That's not an election slogan. E equals mc squared. You need some religious mythology. You need some political ideology. You need some economic theory to convince people, hundreds of thousands of people, to cooperate to build the atom bomb. Not just the physicists, the engineers, the technicians, the people who grow the food to feed the engineers and the technicians. Humans are able to hold both. In fact, to succeed, you usually need both.
I agree with Yuval's premise that we need both. And actually, it's not a malfunction of us that we have this part that likes fiction. The question is, which are the good fictions to buy into? Which are the whys that we should promote our leaders sharing? And if you go back to their political theory about that we don't act as our best selves in the largest groups, it doesn't scale well, then I have to be led back to the idea that the best, healthiest fictions come from within each of us. It is our personal and creative imagination and stories of how we can flourish, imagination and stories of how we can flourish at a small but enjoyable scale. These are the fictions, these imaginative, future-focused stories of who we can be in our villages, both local and global. That are the fictions we should be encouraging in each other. You shouldn't be believing my fiction about all of society, about all of humanity, about all of the world. You should be sitting in the choir with your friends and your family, trying to listen to that still small voice inside you that's speaking from that childish place of play and experimentation that says, wouldn't it be fun if, imagine we could be like this. Wouldn't this be a way to connect more deeply and to be more creative and imaginative together? Those are the fictions that I think are the safest for us to follow. And therefore, the role of governance becomes to protect that space from dominant fictions that claim absolute truth, from policies that prevent us from individually asking that question of our own insides, of our own souls, really, our own selves. And they go on in the conversation to talk about where are we now then with Corona and the carbon situation. And I think it actually illustrates the point very well that how we tell our stories of the truth makes a huge difference. And we all know this. In my Oxford Union, I talked about Miles Allen's work saying, roughly speaking, we've got 400 gigatons or billion tons of carbon left to emit before we overheat. And we're currently doing it at just under 40 gigatons per year. So that means that at this rate, in 10 years, if we maintain current course, then we will be overheating. The stats show from the Global Carbon Project that in 2020, our emissions were down by 7%, which is almost 2.5 billion tons of carbon. This is, to me, an amazing result. This says that we have behaved, for whatever reason, correctly. If we did that 4 years in a row, dropped by 2.5 billion tons of carbon year on year for 4 years, we'd be down to 30 gigatons a year. If we do another 4 years, we'll be down to 20. We will have halved it in 8 years. We do that for another 8 years, and we will be down to a global net zero by 2038. If I were a betting man and you could tell me that by 2038 we would be at global net zero, I would take that bet and I would cash all my chips in on that. Given that that is absolutely incredible news, given that for 200 years we've been doing nothing but going in the opposite direction, how can the new scientist feel that it's responsible journalism to take that information and say that the record CO2 emissions drop in 2020 won't do much to halt the climate crisis, even though it is the biggest drop since 1945? Because how we are and the stories we believe in and tell each other manifest our reality, create the next moment in the making of history. Why would we choose to believe any other story than one that says, we're doing it, guys? We have been sufficiently incentivized by the risk of the pandemic to massively alter our behavior and have a transformative effect on our climate budget. If we carried on in this way over 20 years, yes, our methodologies would change. It wouldn't just be about not flying so much. It would be about creating innovations and continuing to, but we're beginning to do that. We're building these systems of carbon investment. We're figuring out artificial photosynthesis. We're figuring out air carbon capture. Every bit of time that we move on in this pattern, we have a chance to do it day on day, year on year. Before 2040, we can be at net zero if we follow the pattern that we're on for the last year. We've proven that within Team Human, we do have the political and social will to change our behaviors. But there are some systemic and strategic things that need to happen for us to have a chance of having the same 2.5 gigaton drop in 2021 and 2022 and 2023. But let's just think about the next year. We need to let some of these airlines fail. We can't bail out the airlines. We need some planes, and we need the Teslas of the sky to carry on innovating towards greener ways to fly, but we don't need as much as we had. We need to drop our meat consumption by about half and move our proteins to nuts. You can still eat some meat. Some of the vegans are weighing the balances up nicely, but we need to keep moving in that direction. And we have to listen to our inner authentic stories. Why? Because we humans need fictions. We have this irrational part of ourselves that isn't going away. What it means to be our best selves is not to be entirely rational. That void needs filling. So will it be filled with somebody else's story of why that goes in and sends us off in certain directions? Or will it be filled with your own inner authentic story that allows you to build something that's true to yourself in a small but beautiful way? I know which world I want to be a part of. I know that this story of what's happened with carbon over the last year gives me source of great realistic hope. And we need to be responsible for the stories that we're telling each other. So 3 things to take away. Maybe think about keeping your pattern of transport as close as you can to Corona year. Can you halve your meat intake? Can you eat more nuts and beans? Can you plant some trees and start drawing down some carbon yourself? And can you start listening to that inner authentic voice to satisfy your own irrationality in a beautiful way? Guys, take care of yourselves and look after each other. I'll see you very soon.